Remember those 1800 holiday lights I put on Wilson back in December? Well, I never thought that taping them to the bus would cause me to have to do a bunch of paint repair on Wilson's patina. Don't worry, we're still not rocking a new paint job yet. Guten Tag, meine Freund, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Joe, and don't worry, I'm not going to attempt to do the podcast in German in honor of my 67 German VW bus, Wilson. That, I guarantee, would be a disaster because I left German class back in 1987. I really should try to pick it up someday, though. Today we're going to talk about paint, specifically Wilson's pearl white patinaed paint. Something I'm very proud of, trying to keep as much of that original paint as possible. If you remember this past December, I purchased 1,800 LED Christmas lights and thought it'd be nice if I taped them all over Wilson for my holiday decorations. I used some blue painter's tape, which has a very light adhesive, so I wasn't worried about doing any damage to that paint on the bus. So after New Year, I rolled Wilson back into the garage when the festivities were over, and I removed all the lights and put them back in a big box for next December, and then took off all of the little pieces of the blue painter's tape. Everything looked good, no damage, no problems, so I closed the garage, and I let Wilson hibernate for most of the month of January because I was really busy with work, and I was away for a work convention and had some family stuff like I told you before. When I got around to doing a little spring cleaning on Wilson, I noticed that there was some little dust that was sticking to all the places where the blue painter's tape was holding those Christmas lights on. Every few feet or so, there was a little tacky spot that just had a little bit of dust on it. So, no big deal. I grabbed a shop rag, sprayed a little simple green on that, and I scrubbed lightly, and it came right off. Then I also tried the little wax and grease remover, and that worked just as well. Put it on a little rag, no problem. A little dust, a little tacky, a little adhesive, all gone. Now, if you remember, most of Wilson's pearl white paint is nicely patinaed and oxidized and chalky and faded, with that real nice patina look, which I liked. Everywhere I just rubbed the dirt off of Wilson with my little rag with cleaner on it was now polished. And when I stepped back to take a look at the side of the bus, Wilson looked like a spotted leopard with a bunch of shiny spots. I was like, great. There's no way around this. Wilson's going to need to get a quick compounding and polish just to even out the finish. So I regrettably grabbed my Meguiar's Diamond Cut Compound 2.0 and my polisher, and I went to work. But it didn't take any time at all. I just put a little bit of polish or compound, on the pad, and I cleaned up and polished the paint. But now I could really see some additional paint issues from the repairs that I had done 2 years ago. So if you haven't remembered that episode, when I repaired all the big rust that was from the missing sheet metal, at the bottom of the rockers and the lower of the cargo doors, and I had to replace that metal down there, I had to apply some single-stage paint onto the new metal to make sure that it wouldn't rust again. I couldn't just leave bare metal there. So I went to my local auto body supply house, and I had them mix up a quart of PPG Omni single-stage paint, and I provided them the color code for a 1967 pearl white VW bus. When I sprayed it out on Wilson, however, it was like a slightly grayish tone than the rest of the color that was on the bus, and it always had bothered me. It also had more gloss than the old patinaed paint. And if I was going to try to fix this color match, I was going to need to do some more paint to this thing. I had tried to sort of, Scotch Brite it or wet sand it, and it never just sort of matched. So what I did now is I took one of the pieces that I still had from where the windows were cut out on the side panel of Wilson, and I cleaned up and polished that up real well. And I took that piece back to the auto body supply house and asked them to use the color meter to match up the paint. So now I had this new quart of paint, which was, by the way, twice the price of when I purchased the same exact paint 2 years ago. And I figured all I had to do was spray this onto the areas that bothered me, and we'd be all good to go. So I masked off the garage, with big sheets of plastic, drop cloths. And then I masked off the front end of Wilson and the top. And then I painted from basically behind the front doors and from like where the windows are down, basically the side of the doors and like the quarter panel area. And I thought this would be much better. Only when I rolled the bus out into the driveway and pulled off all my masking tape, I saw Wilson in the sun for the first time and realized that this new paint was way too yellow. Just a shade. We're talking like, tiny little shades, but when you have it next to the original paint, you can really see it. I can't win here. I have no choice but to use my calibrated eyeball to mix up some of the old paint and some of the new paint, about 50-50 into a new can, and then I dabbed that on and tried that color, and finally, I got the pearl white color right now. But I had to remask everything up again and sand and scuff down that recently applied paint, and then I could repaint it all over again on another day. Don't get the idea that I repainted the whole bus. It was just the areas that I had to. Like I said, from the front doors back and from like the window line, that nice sort of ribbed belt molding, I guess you would call it, down to the bottom of the rockers. It's just what I had to. Wilson still has a lot of his original paint left, and a good amount of the scrapes and dents too. But now that I was cleaning things up a bit, I wanted to get rid of that giant round dent on Wilson's right rear corner. So I opened up the engine hatch, and I slid my hand up along the inside of the panel, and sure enough, I could feel the backside of the dent. I'm like, okay, this is good, I can get my hand up in there. But there really isn't enough room to swing a hammer back up inside that engine compartment. So the first thing I wanted to try was a little trick I had used successfully on some of my other car repairs over the past few years. I took one of my kids, and now this time it was my granddaughter's, inflatable soccer balls, a football, a soccer ball, anything inflatable like that. I deflated it, and I stuck it completely up in the panel area, and then inflated it with about 150 psi to pop the dent out. And this took out about 50% of the dent, which wasn't too bad, but I could probably do better. So I stopped by my buddy John up the street, my pal who's the contractor, and I borrowed his pneumatic palm nailer, which I had used to fix my deck last summer. I used some old steel rods that I had, and then I tried to put them at the end of the pneumatic palm nailer and tried to hammer out the dent from the backside by lying in the engine compartment and reaching up to the dent with the palm nailer in one hand and holding on this steel rod, and then trying to keep my other hand on the outside of the bus and hold a curved dolly on the outside with my other hand. Otherwise, it would just bang a bunch of, big dents in it. After about an hour of torture, I gave up, and I called my son Zach to see if he could lend me a hand. And he came over, and we were both off that day. And he was able to reach inside while I coordinated the effort and managed the dolly on the outside. And it worked pretty well. We got most of the big dent out in just a few minutes. It was pretty easy, actually. We both have the same little bruises on our side from leaning inside of the engine compartment. Some of the original paint, however, came off right where it was banging out the dent. So I applied a little mix of some white and yellow and gray and black and red oxide primer to the area, and just sort of mixed it all up, gave a couple little dabs in there, and gave it a quick rub down with a Scotch-Brite, and it looks like it pretty much belongs there. I would say it's a little patinaed fake rust, maybe. I don't know. I just sort of like what some of the other areas would look like where it's got the rust inhibitor on it. I sadly, though, destroyed John's palm nailer in the process of using it to remove the dent. It sort of cracked in the front area. I don't know how it got the little crack there. But I stopped in at the store and I bought him a new one, because I have a policy that if I break it, I buy it. John wasn't too happy with me, and not that his tool was broken, but because I bought him a new one. He said that he had the tool under warranty and it was no big deal. He simply needed to mail it back to the manufacturer and they would send him back the repaired item. So I told him that I would return the brand new one only if he got the old one repaired to his satisfaction. So let's just hold off. And about a week later, he got his old palm nailer back from the manufacturer, and it was like brand new. So I had no choice but to take the new one back to the store too. But John, he's always lending me tools, telling me don't buy something, just borrow it here. And, I feel bad if I break something, but he's a good friend, and I wouldn't want to stick him with a broken tool. So about a week later, I was at a car show in Kenilworth, and I had some guy come up to me and comment how nice it was to see that I had all the original paint on the bus still. And he says, they give out trophies for original paint at this show. But, I usually leave before they give out trophies anyway. I tried to explain to him that, some of the panels were repainted just a few days ago, but the guy didn't believe me. He said, nah, so I guess I'm just as content as ever with the paint on Wilson. It is still looking like, his patina finish, but it's just a little bit shinier on the sides. Just look like I've compounded and polished, which for probably half the bus I have. At the show, I got reacquainted with another guy that used to do my sandblasting years ago when I worked with another neighbor who owned a sign shop in that town of Kenilworth. If I need something sandblasted, I can always go back to that guy up there, Artie. But not 15 minutes later, I met a guy that also powder coats wheels. Maybe the universe is trying to talk me into taking the wheels off Wilson and get them sandblasted and powder coated. Something to think about. Maybe in the fall or in the winter. I really just don't feel like doing it now. That's going to do it for this episode. Next time, we will talk about my oil change and tune-up for the season, and also a nice evening that I spent with VWs and a bunch of Germans at the Deutscher Club car show. I'll talk to you then.